satellites. A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.
Welcome to Satellite Haiku.
Yes, welcome to Satellite Haiku. Sorry, I was waiting for you to say I'm Milo.
No,
I'm Sean.
I actually was thinking I wanted to be a little bit more diplomatic about it and be like,
Yeah.
go back and forth, you know.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. It's funny that
I wasn't on the same page.
No, it's true. I mean, it's not necessary.
I didn't get that memo from our producer.
Isn't it funny that I think we're able to do this without a producer? And we talked about it last time a little bit, maybe honing in on a topic.
I mean, I just think if we really wanted to make this a thing, because that way you could potentially have guests and things like that, right? You know what I mean? Like then you would need a producer if you were trying to get somebody set up remotely with a microphone or whatever, right? Like if we had a particular domain area or topic area that we were focused on, you know, maybe we'd have other people, things like that. But, you know, as we talked about last time, we don't have like lofty ambitions for this. It's more like a pretext to talk once a week, and it's a family artifact potentially. And we do have a handful, more than a handful. Like we have a double-digit listeners, and yeah. I mean, I get some notes once in a while from people.
That's great. I mean,
we have.
Yeah. I'll admit this, that
it's not nobody.
It's not nobody.
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
And hopefully, you know, like when I like to put on Satellite Haiku when I'm cooking or hanging the laundry or something, and it's just great background to listen in. You know, okay, here's the thing for me. Like if I go to my YouTube, what are they, saved playlists or YouTube like topics, you can save things.
Right.
And it started during the pandemic when I was trying to learn like tons of different things, you know, sourdough gardening, like how to make a filter for rainwater, all this shit. But I started scrolling and you can't alphabetize it. So it's kind of just kind of mayhem in there. But I just scroll and scroll and scroll. And sometimes I do that and I think, I have 300 interests. I'm just kind of randomly picking a number, but like I have things that I've like done at least more than a 5 to 10 to half an hour inquiry on. The numbers in like the 300s. I was talking to my mom yesterday about how my mom always expected, like in our family, you know, my dad tried to get a PhD. My mom had a master's degree in linguistics. And they always just expected us, like, you should get a PhD in something. You know, pick something and get a PhD because that's what people do. You know, that was sort of like expected. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to spend that many years focusing on one thing that I don't necessarily love.
Sorry, I'm under the weather, but keep going.
And now that I look at that list, I'm like, well, no wonder I didn't want to spend 7 years getting a PhD in, you know, some topic, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? And are you the same? That's like an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I've often described myself as a generalist, not a specialist, and I think a PhD or an MD there's a lot of sort of domains that kind of require you to narrow your interests and become a specialist rather than a generalist. And I think that there's a part of me that always envied generalist type people because
you mean specialist?
I mean specialist type people because I mean it's just like they know exactly what they're interested in. They hone in on it. They kind of pursue that one thing, you know, happily. But I always thought, like, you know, when I take the things I most enjoy, like if I imagine doing just that one thing all the time, like making that a job, it's like, I don't want that to be a job. I like that to be a thing that I enjoy along with other things, right?
Yeah,
like
that's true.
It would quickly stop being fun if it were a job, I think.
It's true.
Yeah. So you know, it's funny when I went to when I worked in Germany, a lot of the people I worked with were PhDs, and I asked one guy, I was like, why does everybody have like a PhD? And these are just like middle managers at this, you know, Vodafone where I worked. And you know, the guy, one of the guys explained to me, he said, well, Germany has had, you know, periods of pretty bad unemployment and we have free college. So like when you don't have a job, you just go back to school and it's paid for.
Yeah.
So, so it's like, you know, when the job market's not good, everybody just goes back to school. and you study stuff. And so there's people with multiple PhDs because it's, doesn't cost anything really.
Yeah.
That seemed like a pretty nice deal.
It does. And I used to say back in the 90s, like when my kids were little, and I was contemplating, like I had come out to Arizona to do an MFA.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I didn't ever do it was the year that I arrived, which was 94,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like missed the window to apply. And then just because I had a baby, like my daughter was born in January, and you're supposed to apply like January 15th, and my daughter was born on like the 6th, So I was horrified that I missed the window. And then there was this department, it was a photography department associated with the Center for Creative Photography. And there were 11 students, like 11, MFA students. And they had like a rebellion and all like walked off. Like they all left. They said, we're not getting enough support. Our studios are too small or something. I forget what exactly the details. One of them was a friend of mine. And she said, yeah, we just bailed on this whole program. And I was like, really, really glad that I hadn't done all the work to get in and then to, have it blow up.
Yeah.
And I went and took a bunch of master's classes with the same professors. And I wasn't, I made Judith Golden, who's just passed away. She was a bookmaker, photography bookmaker. And so I was really interested in bookmaking. But anyway, long story short, they changed the terminal degree because MFA is like a PhD in the arts. So they said it's a terminal degree, so it can no longer be a 2-year program. It needs to be 3.5.
Oh, wow.
Plus like a studio session, which was like basically 4 years. And I just didn't, I didn't see it being something
that's a big commitment. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of money. It was a lot of, and again, back then, if I was an Arizona resident, it really wasn't that expensive, probably $50,000 or $75,000. But it seemed like a lot of work. I had little kids. I was already working as an illustrator and graphic designer. And
right. In order to commit to something like that too, it feels like you have to have, especially once you already have kids and a mortgage and stuff, you have to have like a pretty well-defined plan for what you're going to do with that at the end. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So it's not just to learn this domain, it's to get this particular kind of job or whatever. Like you have to be pretty clear-eyed about what you're like, like pursuing an engineering degree or something. It's like, well, I know exactly why I'm doing it to get this kind of job, right?
Yeah.
So when you're just a single dude and you're in your college years, you're not necessarily thinking about, I mean, if you're in an engineering degree, you are, but if you're in a lot of humanities degrees, you're not necessarily thinking specifically about like, I'm taking these classes and getting this degree to get this particular job. But once you have kids and a mortgage, you kind of have to think that way. If you're going to invest in 3 years and a bunch of money to do some master's in photography or something, then you're thinking, all right, well then what I'm going to go after is, I don't know, the photo editor at a major publication or whatever. Right?
Yeah. Yes. It's funny because at the time I thought that there were 3 professors in the photo department, and they were both like, they had been there a long time, but they also weren't going anywhere in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that was myopically like the only sort of target or path was to be a professor.
To be a professor.
It's true that like I could have been like a photo editor at a magazine, but I didn't think of it that.
Well, what I'm saying is like, I don't even know how locked on you were to the idea of becoming a professor. Like, were you like, I would take this class so that I could be a professor? Or was it more like, I'm interested in this and I guess maybe I'd be a professor at the end? Like, I don't know how, definitive and laser focused your career idea was at the end of that, if you had one.
Right.
Because what my point is, you kind of have to, if you're already paying for your life and you're going to take a little bit of a detour and pay a lot of money and take 3 years of your life, then when you're already an adult, you kind of have to be laser focused on, why am I doing this? Like, what is it for? What is this a stepping stone to specifically? You can't be kind of vague about it when you're, when you need to make money.
what made me sort of start to think about it, it was this week I was looking through some of the film producers or magazine producers for our local affiliate, PBS affiliate, that make, little short video documentaries once a week or something.
Yeah.
One of them was a foreigner, a woman who was maybe naturalized now, but a Turkish person I looked at her resume and it was like PhD in philosophy from Stanford. And then it was like master's in engineering from MIT. And then it was like, she just went she had like 3 master's degrees and a PhD.
All over the place, yeah.
And now she's a filmmaker. And I was like, weird. That's the opposite of my path. Like exactly, I just didn't do that.
Well, there's certain people that kind of get addicted to academia, I think, almost. And what was that movie, Kicking and Screaming? Do you remember that movie? No. It's about a bunch of college. It's set on a college campus. It's like kind of this group of friends. They're all getting kind of ready to graduate from college, different degrees, right? And Eric Stoltz plays like a post-grad student that's in their circle of friends. But his thing is like he's on his like 3rd PhD, and his whole character's thing is like he just is so resistant to joining to entering like the real world. So like he just keeps finding ways to stay in college.
Yeah, that we used to call
It's a great movie, Kicking and Screaming.
Kicking and Screaming. Maybe I have seen it. We used to, when we were, when I was a child, there was a couple of people in our hometown who had, like, were independently wealthy and they just were always in school. Like one of the uncles of one of my cousins. And my parents called it being a perpetual student. That was their term for it. Yeah. And then the other thing was, we used to talk about the ivory tower. Like my dad wanted to be a history professor. There was that one moment when he came back from Holland with us and went to a conference, and there were like 200 positions around the country, and there were like 5,000 applicants, and they all had PhDs. And he was like, wow, that's not going to work. The math doesn't work there. So
the math doesn't matter.
So he went into like financial stuff because he could, But we talked about, the being in the ivory tower, meaning like you're sort of insulated. Like if you're tenured, you have a great salary and you have office hours and and you don't have to, for instance, like if you were running a science lab and you had to constantly write grants, but you're not because you've been endowed by some chair, you have a chair or something, endowment. So you're just sort of sitting there and doing your thing. It seemed so appealing, like the ivory tower, like where you get to do your...
I mean, that's kind of how I treated college. And then maybe that's just a humanities versus, say, STEM and engineering approach to college. This was just like, I'm going to take the classes I'm interested in. I want to learn the things I'm interested in, learn about the things I'm interested in learning about, right? Like if you're an engineering student, you're like, I need to take this class and then I need to take this class so that I can apply for this internship so that I can get this job, right? Like it's a totally different approach to college when you're an engineer versus like an English major or a philosophy major or whatever, right? I mean, there are degrees in the humanities where you might be more or less focused on, or like more or less targeting a particular job. But I think a lot of humanities degrees aren't really like that. I guess, anyway.
I had this experience where, and I think I at NYU I took a communication arts course because I could I could use almost any artistic class as a one of the electives. Like I had to take 4 core classes and then anything
That's
else.
exactly why people kind of a little bit make fun of communications degrees, because it's just kind of like the catch-all. Like, oh, you studied a bunch of stuff. What do we call that? I don't know. Communications.
Like I was annoyed because we were shoved in, instead of being in the art school, we were shoved into CNAP, which was School of Education, Health, Nursing, and Arts Professions. Yeah, which had an ugly acronym name.
They probably has more letters now than it did then.
Probably did, yeah. And anyway, so I was annoyed that was the name of our school, because I wanted to be, Tisch School of the Arts was such a cool name, and we were CNAP, and they were like, oh, you're CNAP, oh, you're that kind of artist, Anyway, so I remember I took a jazz guitar. I took, in fact, my advisor, when I was sitting with my advisor, he was looking through my ANC, my Bernathen College kind of curriculum CV, and he was like, wow, like studying these religion classes, that's communications. Like he just sort of He literally was like checking off.
What can we apply this to? Yeah.
Totally.
What degree path can we apply this to?
So he was
communications. That kind of covers anything you do.
Yeah. He had gone to, I'm waving a little bit here, but he had gone to NYU when it was a city school.
Yeah.
Like Hunter or City College of New York. Mm-hmm. And so he was a professor there now, but then when he went there, it was a public school, and then it turned private. It turned private. And he said a lot of reason that they went private was because Harvard was being anti-Semitic toward New York Jews.
Yeah.
So they turned NYU into what they wanted to be, like a city Harvard, like a Harvard of their own, So that was his story. I actually never looked it up, but anyway, so back to this thing. So I'm taking all these classes, and I remember thinking, I did do like what I would call a minor. I did my thesis film in animation. Mm-hmm. And it felt like the thing that I really wanted to spend like lie on the floor, work at night, like I'd book the room from 10 at night to 5 in the morning, like that kind of thing. For the last, if other people would be like, dude, you should be playing Frisbee in Central Park in your last semester and not lying on the floor of the animation studio.
I sometimes think about Tisch now, and I think about I remember one of the dynamics back then was that it sort of weeded people out naturally that were like, even it accepted more people than made it through Tisch film anyway, because there was this grind to, just film by nature, you have to have editing rooms, you have to have cameras, you have to have film stock, right?
Yeah.
There's an overhead to doing that, to getting a film degree, where you have to book time in an editing room, and you have to rent a camera, and you have to, if you don't have one, you have to buy film stock, right? And and then you have to so there's other things you would have to do now still with, finding actors and, scheduling time with people and blah, 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 if you were doing a film with actors or scripted film. But there's so much stuff that you don't have to do anymore with film and editing, right? You know what I mean? Like editing rooms, you can edit on your own laptop.
Yeah, no, it's true.
You don't need to book time in an editing room. You don't need to you don't need specialized equipment.
Right.
All this stuff. And so back then there were these bottlenecks for the people who were really committed. They would get the cameras first, and they would get the editing rooms first, and then the other people would be like, shit, the only time left in the editing room is at 3 a.m.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like those people end up dropping out because they weren't committed enough to really be on it, everything, right? And so then you get Spike Lee graduating, but a lot of aspiring filmmakers just never make it through, because it's just kind of built to weed people out in a way.
Yeah. It makes me think I had this,
or you drift into a sort of a side avenue of it, sound editing or something. You're like, I'll just do that.
Yeah. I eventually,
you have these aspirations to be a filmmaker, but you're like, it's too much of a pain in the ass. I need all this shit. I'll just do the sound editing for the other people making films.
Yeah. I ended up, when we would meet for lunch up near the UN, that was my first job. And I was, I started out as a messenger for this offline editing house that did commercials. Mm-hmm. So it just felt like a natural, that was like a job that you would do if you had been interested in film,
Yeah.
But anyway, I wanted to go back and say, so I had this professor, I took, I guess, a journalism class. You had to take, maybe that was one of the core ones. And this guy it was one of those seminars where there's 300 people in the room, one of those. And the guy's the dude is he writes for New York Magazine. He's a famous, columnist. It's Diamond, Mr. Diamond, Professor Diamond. He'd walk in and he'd have 4 grad students that were his entourage, and they would carry his stuff, and you know what I mean. He was that kind. He was a celebrity. Yeah, I teach at NYU. I teach on Tuesday afternoons. And 300 kids.
He was Prof G would be probably is like that now.
Yeah, totally, exactly. Prof G is a perfect example. Although I suspect that Prof G is constantly just doing it virtually, because he lives
probably
in London.
At this point, yeah. But there was probably an interim phase where he was starting to get kind of famous.
Yeah, totally. And so anyway,
now he's next level. He has too many things. He's calling in from Monaco at the casino hotel where he's staying.
So he gave us this assignment to pick, one sort of one communications technology, like the invention of, I picked radio, like Marconi's radio. And then you're supposed to sort of do a historical analysis and then kind of like talk about how it changed the way we globally communicate. And so I sat down and just wrote this paper, and I'd always been like, writing always came naturally to me. Like I just could just chug away, and I could easily write 13 pages when the assignment was 5. Like I could say, perhaps, what if this, And so anyway, I write this paper on my little Mac Classic. Like I had a Mac Classic that was a tiny little black and white screen, and I remember clicking away. And I turned the paper in. I remember printing it on the image writer, and it never worked the first time. Like it always jammed, and you had to like tear it out. And remember the image writer had those holes in the sides.
Yeah. It had the holes on the side. Yep.
Made a lot of noise, like And so he, I turn it in, and it's 300 people, and he says like, "Hey, Michael, I've come up to the front after we, the next day," and I was like, why? This is like, there's all these people in the seminar, and he's like, how much did you pay for this paper? And I honestly didn't quite understand what he said. So I was like, what? And he's like, how much did you pay for this paper? And it was in front of everyone, and I was like, nothing. I just wrote it in my room. I can show you the file. Like I just wrote it. And then he goes, okay, well then is your dad Peter Jennings? And I was like, I just didn't understand like what he was basically saying it was a really good paper.
Right.
And he
must
sort of
have cheated.
He was either you cheated or you should join my entourage. He was kind of inviting me to be one of the entourage people. Like, hey, do you want to hang out with me and follow me around and carry my shit? And I was like, no. I said, no, I'm more like I'm doing my thing in animation, and I'm taking this. Like, I'm not a journalism student. And he was like, oh, you're not in journalism? Why are you even in my class? And I was like, because I'm communication arts. and he was sort of like, didn't understand that, it was like one of the most awkward.
Right. He was like, how did you even make it in here?
Yeah, exactly. He was sort of like, how did you?
We're supposed to filter out the people who aren't really interested.
The dedicated journalists are the only ones who should be in here. You're wasting a seat. Right. Anyway, it was one of those weird exchanges, but it kind of, the story exemplifies everywhere I went at NYU. Because I was communication arts, I was an outsider. I had to bring a portfolio, ask the teacher for permission before I could even apply for the class, like with those dumb, cards. Remember we had those cards with the holes? That's how we applied. You had to stand in a really long line, and then you'd get to the front. They'd put the card in, and they'd say, "Oh, that class is full." Or in my case, they'd be like, "Oh, you can't apply until you get permission from the teacher." And I'd be like, "Oh shit, that means I have to go ask when office hours are to show them my portfolio." So I did that, and I would, if I was dedicated enough, I would go through that nasty process. But that was the entirety of my experience in that sort of outsider communications art field. Like I thought I was smart to pick that because it was so diverse. But it turned out I had no like loyalty from any department.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wow.
Huh. So we're sort of. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go on. I wanted to hear what your thoughts about, just college in general.
Well, I was just going to say, it's sort of dancing on the edge of something I was thinking about from a couple weeks ago when we were talking, and last week. And I was thinking about more this week. And, we talked a couple weeks ago about this notion of the process, like versus the product, and like, the hipsters that were doing artisanal stuff and all that, right? And I was thinking more about that this week with like, I don't know if you heard this, but Disney laid off like 1,000 people. A lot of them were marketing, but a lot of them were also the digital arts people, like the what do they call them? Creative arts, or no, I forget the name of it. But like the guys who did like like one of the guys I saw who got laid off did the concept designs for like the Ant-Man costumes and stuff for like the Ant-Man movies, right? And like what their costumes would be like, the concept design, right? And so there were people, actors associated with Marvel that were kind of like posting stuff that were sort of in protest a little bit, saying this is bullshit. Like Disney is laying off these people. They think they can use AI to do this guy's job. And assuming they can use AI to do this guy's job, it's only because it's sucked in all his hard work, right? Like it's it just stole his work. If AI is going to do it, like it's doing it on his back, basically. Like it took his. Anyway, so I was thinking about like what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, and I had a thought, a sort of a way of framing it that I hadn't thought of before. That feels like kind of the essence to me is like of this product versus process thing. It's like there's the sort of the fundamental clash to me seems like it's between, because I heard these, sorry, I'm going to digress again. I heard these guys on an AI podcast. It was like business guys, tech bro type guys. The podcast is called Moonshots. And I listened to one episode. It's like a 2-hour episode. And these 4 guys that just like, they're so excited about the AI future, right? And they're going through this sort of like roundups of a whole bunch of different AI related news stories, and their little chit chat about each one. But the sort of the takeaway, the overall tone of their podcast was just how excited they are about this coming AI future, where it solves every problem and does every job. And I was just thinking about like that guy at Marvel, and I was thinking about stuff we talked about. And it seems to me that the fundamental clash comes down to whether the work product is the only thing that's valuable, or whether the work itself has value, right? Because I think like people who work in an engineering job, maybe might be an example, or like just a basic like a coding job or a software development, or just a lot of different sort of business functions where you have to, create PowerPoints and pitch people on ideas and, do all internal bullshit type jobs, which I worked so many years doing. But in those kind of jobs, in all those kind of jobs, like if you have to make a PowerPoint to convince your management team that this project is worth doing, right? Like the work on that PowerPoint is not important. The work you do, the work itself has no value. Like ultimately the value is just in the work product. If you're coding software and you're making an app, like the coding work that you're doing doesn't really have any value. It's the app that you make in the end that has some value.
Right.
But when it comes to something like, if the mind of an artist, like the temperament of an artist is that the work itself has value. Like the work product, the thing you create in the end has value, but your whole journey to that thing also has value as an artist. Like you're learning things. And then maybe you're collaborating with people. Like you have this collaboration, like back to that Pinocchio movie with Guillermo del Toro, right? Like he collaborated with all these designers who built, and engineers who built figurines and, like built sets, and like there was this amazing team effort. Or like another thing I talked about a few weeks ago is the Beatles, on one of their albums, they wanted the orchestra, the sound of the orchestra, just like making sound until it was just a cacophony of chaotic, the loudest sounds that all the orchestral instruments could make. And I remember I was telling you that they were worried that these like buttoned up classical music types wouldn't be able to just summon whatever kind of freedom they needed to find in themselves to just do something that noisy and unscripted, unwritten, chaotic, right? Improvised. They weren't improvisers by nature. So they had this idea like, what if we just had a party and we just had this super silly party with all of them in a big warehouse, and we all just got silly together. And then they would feel so uninhibited that they could do this thing, right? Like if you could just produce what they ended up producing on a computer, like you wouldn't have had that whole process, that whole collaboration, the silly party, that whole experience, right? Like, and so I think there's a lot of people who don't have that sort of artistic temperament at all. Like they just don't identify it with it. They've never felt it, that inward sort of curiosity and itch to create something. And so like when you are a humanities person in college, you're choosing classes because you're curious. You're kind of enjoying the experience of learning on some level, right? Maybe you even enjoy the experience of writing. So this like this whole thing about AI writing everybody's papers for them in college, right? Like I sit down at my Substack and I'll write something laboriously And I have no temptation to use AI to do that, because I'm not really that, like, the final thing that comes out in the end when I press publish is only one tiny little piece of that whole experience for me. Like, I like writing the piece.
Mm-hmm.
I like doing the research, and I like refining the paragraphs and the sentences until it's kind of what I want. And it might take me 2 days to do it, but I enjoy that. Like, it's a thing that I enjoy doing. Like, I enjoy the doing of it. So I was just thinking about, like, how it seems like there's this fundamental clash between, like, people who have that sort of love of just the process and the doing, and they find value in the doing of the thing, and the people on the other side of that see value in the doing of the thing. And then there's a whole swath of people that just don't get that at all. They just don't. It doesn't compute to them. They're just like, that's not even a thing that would occur to them, that there's the value in the doing. It's just like if your computer can make the Bourne movie, why wouldn't you just have the computer do it? Like, why would you have people do that? Why would you have the guy at Marvel Studios who does concept design when a computer could just do that? Because there's a guy who loves doing concept design, and he loves the doing of it, right? Like, I think there's the business side of it doesn't understand that doesn't sort of acknowledge or understand, or even like can't even conceive of the value of there being value in the doing of something, only in the thing that comes out of the doing, right?
I think you're pointing at what both the two things are converging for me in this line of reasoning or inquiry, and that is this idea of the Kali Yuga. And I'm not an expert on the Kali Yuga, but there is a moment, maybe after the event horizon or before. There's a moment where we've become so productive, or we've automated everything, and they don't obviously talk about that, but we've become so rich as a society that we don't need to work anymore. And that our purpose, which we need a sense of purpose, is to explore really the purpose of being alive, or explore spirituality in a way that we have never had a chance to when we were hunter-gatherers. That's not to say that hunter-gatherers were not spiritual beings or didn't.
No, but it's sort of like the Maslow hierarchy. Like, if you have to put so much energy towards your own survival, then you're not going to have that much energy to pay to your inward life.
Right. Exactly. So, so while I was sort of studying yogic philosophy and stuff, some of the Sanskrit scholars would say, sort of the purpose of studying this philosophy, Pratnabhijna Hridayam, like this famous texts that are like the sutras, the Yoga Sutras. And they'd say the purpose is to prepare yourself for that state when you're supposed to be doing this inner work. And the second thought I had was, I think there will come a time, an awkward time, when the guy who used to design Ant-Man's costume is laid off.
Yeah.
But the plumber and the electrician who come to fix your pipes is still showing up for work. And the guy who gets laid off, we don't know, but we're going to have to figure out something for people to do.
That was actually part of my thought, is that it's like, I hear that, like, these AI guys that sort of are excited for this future. And then even the ones that are a little bit skeptical in those conversations, that are sort of like, well, what do we do with the people who are put out of work? Like, Ezra Klein might be the kind of guy who raises that question. Like, and then in those conversations, like, there'll be this sort of like gesture toward, well, we need to retrain that guy, so he has a job that does exist, that does continue to exist. But like, if you're the guy who does concept design for, Marvel stuff, and they were like, well, we'll retrain you to do home healthcare for elderly people because there's tons of that, and robots can't do that yet, right?
Yeah.
Like that's so sad. Like, even if that guy made twice the money doing home healthcare than he made doing concept design, it's like, that's not what that guy is. You know what I mean? You can't just retrain a concept artist and put him in home healthcare and be like, hey, we just moved that chess piece from here to here, and cool, job's done. everybody's happy. Like that guy's fucked, basically. Like he's doing Helm Healthcare now, and he's a concept designer. Like that's not a good ending for that guy.
Wait, so this brings up so yesterday for whatever reason, I woke up from my nap and I Googled Che Guevara.
Yeah.
I guess I watched Motorcycle Diaries, but I never really knew the story of the Cuban Revolution. And this dude was, fucking brilliant. Like, I mean, he was so fucking brilliant. And what's interesting is what you're describing there and what we're talking about in terms of like universal basic income and stuff. It has been necessary and tried in multiple times under communism.
Yeah.
Soviet Union, for instance, in Cuba specifically, he writes about, so if we no longer have income and everyone's producing food, like farmers continue to produce food, and we have these co-ops where the government owns all the farms, and you just work on the farm. He goes, because we incentivize people with pay and bonuses to work harder. When you remove that in the dollar or currency from the entire system, how do you motivate people?
Right.
Like, why would the Ant-Man guy want to show up and do a good job as a nurse?
You're absolutely right. But I think the Ant-Man guy wouldn't want to go work on the farm. But like, I think in a way it comes back to that original split of people, because I think there are people in the world, lots of people. There's a category of people. This is that fundamental 50-50. I don't know what the ratios are, but this fundamental difference I just pointed out at the beginning was like people who have an itch to do something and create something and learn stuff. Like there's just people who are self-motivated to create music or something, right? Or drawings or just write stuff or whatever, because they enjoy doing it and they enjoy the learning, the process. Like there is a category of people that like the process of doing stuff, doing a certain thing, and they just like it for itself. And if they didn't have to have a day job, they wouldn't be bored ever. Like the day job takes away from the time that they have for doing the thing that they love doing.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole bunch of other people in the world that don't get that. That's like such a foreign idea at all. Like they go to work and then they come home and they watch TV, right? And then they go to the work the next day. And like, what do they do with their money they make from work? Well, they go on vacation and play golf, right? Like they don't love golf. They like it, right? But I think there's a lot of people that for whom you're right. They just, without that job, what would they do? Like they don't have an internal itch to make stuff. I think there's a certain kind of person who has an internal sort of itch to make things and to do certain things and to learn things. And there's a lot of people who don't really they couldn't even identify that. They don't even, it's weird to them. Like that is not a thing that they experience at all internally. And so it's hard for them to even imagine that other people have that. You know what I mean?
It's kind of like I always said to my kids, they would say, what are you going to do when you retire? And I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to retire. Like there's people who can't wait to retire early at 65. And then they would just want to play golf every afternoon. And they go move to a place that's on a golf course.
Again, it's not that they love golf. It's almost like, what else am I going to do?
Right. And there are people
who I guess I'll golf.
Travel, golf, whatever.
Yeah, so, it's like, well, golf's too expensive, so I'll just do fishing or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that they picked golf because they have a passion for golf. It's just like, I don't know, I guess golf. You know what I mean?
I once went to down to Hermosillo to a friend of mine had this art opening at the museum. And then we went out to dinner with all the other artists and their partners. And they were all over 60. They were like retirees who lived in whatever whatever town is near Hermosillo on the shore, on the beach. And it's just an American colony. It's like an American colony of retirees. I was absolutely horrified to be at that table because the people were so fucking entitled and rude to the waiter. And they'd be like, they'd bring them some red wine and they'd be like, oh, bring me something good. This is terrible.
Yeah. And that's people who have no, like, if you don't have like real friction and purpose in your life, then you invent friction in those kinds of contexts, right? It's like, we need a little bit of resistance in the world and challenge to give us purpose, to make our purpose feel purposeful. And I guess if you don't have that, you're like, I'm going to turn my wine into a problem because I need a problem right now.
I mean, and they literally would be like, do you have, like, they would look at the menu, and then it was a Mexican restaurant, and they'd look at the menu and they'd be like, why don't you have oysters?
Right.
You know, and it's like an hour away from the ocean. They'd be like, because they fucking don't serve oysters. Maybe,
right.
you know.
Again, it's like, I need problems. Like, everything here is fine, but like, I can't deal with fine. I need some friction in my life. So I'm going to create some by asking about oysters. Yeah.
Anyway, so I told my girls,
I'm doing that consciously, obviously.
I told my daughters, I was like, I never want to be those people. I never want, I hope absolutely. I never am those people. And I hope I continue to work on creative pursuits until I die. It's not going to feel like I need to retire from that. You know, I would, I certainly don't want to.
No, it's true. And I do see, there's the other category of retired people who don't have that, what you just described, feeling like you want to keep working on things. The people who don't have that kind of temperament, there's another class of them that they don't necessarily become entitled. They are depressed. They're sitting at home and they don't know what to do with themselves. It's like they're watching 8 hours of TV because they have nothing else. You know what I mean? I know, I see old people like that, you know, on my in-laws' side, some of them.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm going to make a segue that makes perfect sense here. And I'm going to say that since the pandemic, when we were working from home and there was like all these wonderful things, like I could work on the house, I could make bread. I used bread, actually making sourdough, to give me sort of something that was, you know, cadentially, it's like 2.5 days away.
Yeah.
When I get a bake it.
It's a kind of ritual that it requires attention on a certain cadence. Yeah.
Exactly. And it gives you this sense of purpose, like a minor, like a micro purpose that in 2.5 days, I'm going to actually pull it out and cook it, you know, and then I'm going to enjoy it. And so it had this like life cycle that you could repeat. And it felt very comforting.
And in addition to that, it had this sort of like, it had this learning curve of like, you can keep getting better at it.
Exactly.
And then you fuck it up some way, and then you're interested in why did it not rise that time? Or like, and then you have this other avenue to go down. So there's like, the horizon of sourdough keeps getting more expansive. Like, oh, I could learn about scoring. Oh, I could learn about, you know, different ways to proof it. Oh, cold start. You know what I mean? Like there's an endlessly opening landscape of learning in that one thing, right? So it's not just the cadence, but like it keeps opening up new questions.
And you know those like you could look at the recipe in the tartine book, you could read about it, you could follow the instructions, but there's so many steps where it requires prior experience to really feel that the dough is ready, or this, you know, how to do, not to be squish it, not to, you know, not to panic when it sticks to your hands. That was huge for me. Like I used to panic like crazy when it would stick to my hands, and you know, and then And then now I just wet my hands and I totally can manipulate the bread with confidence. And that's something that I didn't expect.
You learn through feel. Yeah. And it's, again, I mean, so that's interesting. That ties back to something we've talked about too, which is like this idea that AI can do all the things or whatever. Like there's so many things. And I talked about John Vervaeke's like 4 ways of knowing. Like that's the difference between propositional knowledge and procedural knowledge. Like you learn how to make sourdough. Like if you could write that all down and give it to somebody who's never made it, and they would run into so many problems, right? Yeah, like there's just no way. You have to learn by doing.
Yeah.
And so this whole learn by doing thing is a whole category of knowledge that, you know, like is a much harder threshold for something like an AI than, you know, all the propositional knowledge. So this is again why I always can't, you know, like it rubs me so the wrong way when I hear some AI, you know, tech bro talking about the sum of all knowledge will be in the palm of your hand. Well, like, no, there's so many different categories of knowledge that couldn't possibly be in the palm of your hand.
So this is another example. And actually the reason I was going to bring this up was that, I don't know if you've seen in the news that there was a cruise ship that left Argentina.
The hantavirus.
And it's the Andes version that's human to human transmission. So I spent, like 45 minutes this morning kind of panicking, like, no, I don't want another pandemic. I don't want to like have to, lock down, wear a mask, figure out what to, like, I just was like, please don't. And then
don't worry, we won't ever have lockdowns and masks or vaccines again. We'll just,
I'll just die of it.
It'll be just survival of whoever,
It sounds like a really
that's the
nasty
RFK future. Yeah.
We have hantavirus in Arizona, especially up north in Navajo Nation.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to avoid. Like, I mean, didn't people surmise or think that Gene Hackman and his wife died in Santa Fe of hantavirus?
I did hear that at some point. Yeah,
it's never been confirmed as like they used an assay to actually test, but there's antibodies you can test for. But anyway, and it's easy to, like, if there's mouse droppings that have dried, if you sweep them up, you create dust airborne, that you breathe, and then And interestingly enough, the hantavirus that's in the U.S. Attacks your kidneys, so you die from kidney disease. The one in Andy's one kills your lungs. The only way to survive it, there's zero medication. The only way to survive it is to use a ventilator. Oof. That's not how I want to go.
No. So like everybody on that ship is like confined to their cabins and stuff, right?
They're all getting off now in Tenerife and they're being evacuated. I think what they can do is it's a very long incubation period, like 1 to 6 weeks.
Yeah. So that's always really scary too, because you don't know if you're carrying it, because you can transmit it during that period still, right?
I don't know. I must be able to. You must be able to. But but I don't know actually. But there's 4 people in the U.S. that already flew back. One of them's in Arizona. 2 are in California. 2 in Georgia. And they're being monitored by the state health. If they were to become symptomatic.
Yeah.
But supposedly the doctor caught it, who was seeing the couple who died, the first couple who got it in Argentina. And then I did a little more research, and Argentina's had 2 fairly scary outbreaks of this same disease. One in 2018. Which is interesting, right before the COVID-19.
Yeah.
And it was a party of, I don't know, 50 people, and 38 people contracted it.
Oh, wow.
But it was imagine like a disco, like a very tight, everyone's sweating and breathing hard. And but they immediately, you can clamp down on it pretty hard because, do you remember the first SARS? It was like the one that was back in maybe the 90s. Yeah. I remember my aunt was coming back with her husband through Singapore. They're flying through Singapore, and they were flagged because they had this camera that could see if your temperature was over 98.6. And they wouldn't let you on the plane if you had a fever.
I see.
But that one, you didn't become contagious for like 2 days after your symptoms started.
Oh, weird. Yeah,
so
that's
that
unusual.
made it very convenient because as soon as someone got sick, you just isolated them.
Yeah, it's like those asymptomatic incubation periods where the transmission happens. Those are the ones that really spread.
Or like COVID-19, where
that's what I mean. Like COVID is one of those, right?
Certain percentage, where certain percentage of the population didn't have any symptoms. But
never had symptoms. Yeah,
never had and could give it.
But even the people who did have symptoms, there was like a week-long, I think it was about a week incubation period, right? Where you're infectious, but you're not having any symptoms.
Which is so annoying. I mean, that's like.
And then then you're right. There was a percentage of people at the end of that who didn't ever have symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Anyway, so back to this idea of, I look at the hantavirus thing. I had 45 minutes of just doom scrolling, like I don't want to do that again. And then it doesn't seem. Do you remember Ebola during Obama when there was an Ebola outbreak? Yeah. And there was a dude that showed up in Austin. Like he showed up in Austin, he flew in, and he had Ebola.
Yeah, and there was a frightening kind of like possibility at first, like, oh, Ebola's coming here. And part of the scary part about Ebola was just the symptoms were so terrifying. Like you hear about like bleeding out like, their eyes.
Yeah,
or
like
whatever.
Just all your organs explode and you're just like it was hemorrhagic fever.
Yeah.
I remember there was this superhero dude who was a doctor from, I think, New York, maybe NYU Hospital, who caught it, was flown to Europe, was given that, they had like I think there was an antibody treatment that they had built right away from people who had survived it. And they made like a clonal treatment. So he survived, and then he went back, and he was like, I don't have to wear protective gear anymore because I'm immune.
Oh, interesting.
It seemed like a superhero thing. Like he could just walk around with Ebola patients who are bleeding out, and he could be like, "Hey, let me help you," and he was immune.
Yeah,
it's so cool. I mean, Anyway,
cool. But I remember that was a scare, like when that came to the U.S. and there was like definitely this sort of like, for a minute there was a fear that it would spread rapidly around or whatever.
There was a guy. He was a friend of one of my coworkers' husbands, and we were at a bar together. And he was in the FBI, and he was like a conspiracy theorist. And he was like, "You guys have no idea what's coming, man. Ebola is going to rage. People bleeding out in the street. It's going to be like zombies." He's like, "I've got all my money in under my mattress." And I was like, "What the fuck, man? I wish you weren't working for the FBI because
you would hope that those prepper types, you would wish that those conspiracy types, after being wrong like for the 10th time in a row about something, that they would eventually be like, maybe my information sources aren't the best." But they never seem to have that level of self-reflection.
I was thinking of Idiocracy because I was watching The Who had a press conference this morning and it was live. And you know how they have that stream of comments that you can watch? I mean, every conspiracy theorist that known to mankind was probably in those comments just saying shit.
It depresses the shit out of me. I have a hard time with it.
There was a back and forth between people that said, "No, is it Grand Theft Auto?" So they're like, GTA 6 is coming out. I can't die before GTA 6 hits the shelves. And I was like, and then other people were like, "You're not going to be able to buy the console because there's no chips." And they're back and forth about GTA 6. And finally I realized it was Grand Theft Auto. I was like, they're talking about a video game and they're freaking out because they don't want to die
before the new game comes out. That's awesome. I mean, talk about like a weird late stage capitalist nightmare. That's funny. Yeah, the other thing that brought a lot of conspiracy theorists out was the Artemis mission.
Oh, really? Oh, because of the moon
like
landing.
The flat earthers and the space isn't real, and the moon landing was fake. All those people came out of the woodwork for that whole thing. So like you sort of forget about them for a minute, but then like something like Artemis happens, and then they emerge from the shadows, and like the moon landing is fake. People always, anyway. I kind of get it on one level, like, especially, I mean, the government has done things, secret bad things for sure. And so, like it's not unprecedented, but like what their moon landing conspiracies are constructed on is so laughably flimsy that it depresses me. It just depresses me.
Obama was on a podcast yesterday, actually, maybe because of the Artemis thing. And all I caught was a clip of him saying, it's pretty laughable to me. He goes, because in order to keep all these conspiracies locked down, like, that there's aliens and we have their ships and they're alive and stuff. He's like, can you imagine some guard in like Area 51 is going to eventually take a selfie with the alien and put it online? He's like, it just can't not happen. Because,
or the other thing that they point to, all these conspiracy things, is like the clues that are intentionally left behind. Like there's always a trail of like coded language or coded, imagery or whatever. Like, oh, they're telling us. See, they left that clue. So it's like there's part of it is like it's almost like a game for the conspiracy theorists to like solve. That's the whole Q thing, right? The Q-Anon was that kind of thing. It's like these coded messages. But a lot of the conspiracy theories about like New World Order and stuff are like, oh, these people meet in the Bohemian Grove or whatever, and then it's almost like the crying of Lot 49. They'll see these like this. They find something that was said, or in the back. It's always like in the background of the YouTube video. Why was that book in the background, right? Like,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Oh, that's a signal. That's a signal that to this group that blah blah. You know what I mean?
I remember
that kind of shit that I just like. Oh, it makes me roll my eyes out of my head almost.
During the maybe it was the 2016 election or during the first Donald Trump thing. I remember pitching to you. It must have been the pandemic, so it must have been 2020. But I remember pitching to you a comedy series based on Fancy Bear. And the idea was that there was a whole bunch of kids in the, Yevgeny Prigozhin's like little, what did he call it? The Internet Research Agency or something.
Yeah.
So there's building in like downtown St. Petersburg, and there's like all these young people that are trying to insert ridiculous Q conspiracies into the thing. Yeah. And they get bonuses like a trip to, the Black Sea thing. If there's it goes viral, like if they can get their thing to go viral, and they're like watching it go viral, and one guy's like, I have an idea, let's flip the script. So we'll say that the people who got the vaccine are shedding the virus, and you can't, they're like, let's do it. You're like,
so depressing.
I still think it had a lot of comedic, stuff to mind.
I agree.
But
there's just something about like the conspiracies and misinformation that it just depresses me though so much. It's just like, I think it's just because like those fucking people also vote.
Right. No, it's true.
And it was like there's a level to which I'm just like, it's this just it's so willfully dumb.
There's chatter right now
and it's the willfulness
Twitter.
And the dumb combined that I can't handle.
There's the latest one about the hantavirus like the chatter on Twitter. That's the conspiracy theorists. So I've seen it like 4 or 5 times, these threads where people say it's the CIA and the pharma companies are worried that the mRNA vaccine, there's no reason to sell it to countries. So they had to release a weaponized version of hantavirus, and then they're going to quickly come up with the vaccine for it so they can sell it to everyone and make trillions of dollars.
So they they latched onto this mRNA vaccine as like a villain, right? And so they have this whole, I
said it's sad that woman that worked so hard to invent it, that she always
and they've latched onto that, but they've latched onto this so many dumb misconceptions about what it even is, like what an mRNA vaccine does and is based on. Like, again, it's so depressing to me because they have zero understanding of the thing that they've made into their boogeyman.
Right. But it's almost essential that they don't have the knowledge of the science because the scientists are the ones that are duping.
But then they've built this whole like adjacent pseudoscience.
Yeah, like the dark horse.
They've built a whole body of pseudoscience. So it's like it, for all those people, it feels like science.
Yeah. Remember those that couple that runs the Dark Horse podcast that are, they're like
Eric Weinstein. Is it Eric or Brett? I forget which one.
I think Brett. I remember the name Brett. Yeah. And his wife.
They're brothers, right? And they're both crazy.
Oh, are they really? I didn't know there was,
Yeah, because like, I think it's Eric that is Peter Thiel's like portfolio manager or something. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, the two of them are both, and they are big fans of each other.
Yeah, it's so annoying.
I mean, that's the one envious thing about them is there's just like, there's a lot of brotherly love there between Brett and Eric.
Yeah.
They're big advocates for each other.
Just for fun, I'm gonna pitch my which I've never heard anyone. So people were like, "Is it the wet market? Did Fauci leave? Did he release it on purpose? Whatever." And I had heard about little evidence that there were some miners in people mining in China out in the mountains, and they had all got sick from a respiratory illness and died. And so the Chinese FDA sent an investigator who went in to collect guano samples. They thought maybe they got it from bats, right? So I said, you know what? I don't know. Like, it's like Joe Rogan. I was like, I don't know this, but I imagine that the person showed up at the cave and they didn't put on a Milex suit with a respirator. They just put on a medical, like a surgical mask. Then they collected the sample. They drove all the way back to the lab. They walked into the lab and then they kind of put it into the chain of custody as if it were like a terribly dangerous thing.
Yeah.
And at that point, maybe it's safe and they can do chain of function research or whatever, gain of function research. But I feel like the weak point was most likely when they were collecting the samples at a place they knew people got sick.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've talked about this before, but yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a good theory.
But it's an interesting thing.
There was another guy I heard on Sam Harris's podcast a while back, and he was talking about just how leaky labs are in general, and how so one of the things he was talking about, and I can't remember the name of it, but there was some sort of open science movement to basically open source everything a lot of these labs were doing, like for the betterment of science, like for better sharing and stuff. But then they kind of realized, like, oh shit, like if we do that, like it becomes really easy for everybody to, any bad actor, to understand which are the most dangerous viruses and how to create them, and whatever. And so but then he was just talking about how in that whole process, like in that whole conversation, he was describing in a number of ways just how leaky all these labs are, and how bad that whole system is in terms of like keeping samples well contained and all that. So, it sounds like it's just a whole like I think your theory is a strong one, because that's probably one of the weakest links. But apparently there's all kinds of other weak, leaky systems and processes involved in all those kinds of labs.
I read the Australian FDA. There was a press conference. Might have been the Prime Minister, but he was saying that there were 293 vials of viruses that went missing from like the Australian FDA research labs. And the number one theory right now is that they were moving them from one freezer to another, and they just got mislaid and then maybe thrown away or something. But then the conspiracy theorists are jumping all over saying like, no, they were stolen. Like, ISIS hired someone to steal them, and now they're like going to spread them around the world.
Do you think with these conspiracy theories, there's like, do you think there's people somewhere at the beginning of that chain of like, that go, hey, I could go viral with this because it's just the perfect kind of thing that would catch on with conspiracy theorists?
Yeah.
Or do you think that like there's true believers that see a piece of news like that about, viruses going missing, and do you think the mindset of that person that starts spreading that news in that conspiracy way, or the small sort of like initial seed of that, the little core of people that start spreading that, I guess I always wonder, like, are there just conspiracy-minded people that see a piece of news like that and immediately latch on to it must be a conspiracy, and they start sharing it? Or is it more cynical than that? There's a group of people that start to see that news and go, ooh, I could get a lot of attention from if I spin this as a conspiracy theory, and it will go viral and I'll get some clicks in this sort of click-based economy.
Without
like, I wonder which it is, or
without
both,
seeing
a mix
any
of both,
data,
maybe.
I would imagine that there's a whole mix, and that's sort of the main conceit of the Fancy Bear comedy series.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that if you can insert something in that's actually ridiculous, but so ridiculous that it makes sense to conspiracy theorists.
Right.
Like the back and forth with the COVID, like remember like the thing of does the shot gives you the vaccine, gives you the virus, and then you shed it and give it to people who don't have the virus. It was just like
I guess I'm just fascinated with I'm fascinated with that whole process, because when I see a piece of information that seems sus on the surface, right? Like, to use the Gen Z word sus, right? Like if I see that, and if there's any little part of me that goes, that seems a little bit sus, right? Like, like that's as far as it goes with me. Like, I'm never going to know the answer, right? Like, I could do a ton of work, investigative journalism style, and really, really do a ton of rigorous work to sort of try to get to an answer, like what really happened to those vials, right? But like, there's a part of me that just goes right at the beginning, like I just stop and I go, I'm never going to know, right?
Or is
like,
it,
I can't know the answer. Like, this person has this, speculates that this happened, and this other person speculates that this happened, and I can't know. So like, I just don't know. And maybe I lean towards this answer or that answer a little bit, but like, ultimately, I don't know, right? And so I'm comfortable with that. I can just leave it there. Like, I don't know, and I can't know, and I won't know, and that's the end of it, right? So I feel like there's a different kind of person that that sees that, and they need to have the answer. Like they need to go, oh, it's definitely a conspiracy. And they just decide on some level that that's the answer. There's no part of them that goes, oh, I just can't know, so I don't know. Like I'm just going to stay with the not knowing. You know what I mean?
I think there's some kind of, I imagine that there's some kind of comfort. Remember how we talked about, I think the cause of conspiracy theories is that we've invented religion as a species because we're uncomfortable with uncertainty.
People with I mean, this is a well-known psychological thing. Like there's people that are more or less comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. That's really what it is. I think that's, do you agree that that's probably what's happening on the other end? There's some people that just like aren't comfortable with uncertainty, and so they need to just pick that answer for themselves.
I think that's, when I think back, we were raised in a very, Christian, obviously alternative Christian group. And I think back, I've asked my mom and dad, like, do you still believe the things we learned? Because we studied this shit. It was 40 volumes of stuff, And I remember thinking like, there's all these very highly intelligent, capable people in this town that in a sheep-like way go to church and read stuff. And you know what I mean? And I felt like at some level, I did it, like I would pray, and I did it because it made me feel good.
Yeah.
But it was only like, if I do this, good thing will happen to me spiritually or in the future. So I'll keep doing it, And so I did it until I was, I don't know, in my 30s. I was like, this is bullshit. Like what?
Yeah.
Why
we should make that, let's make that a whole conversation of a future episode, because I'm really curious about like what started you down the road of just being a little bit questioning of your own certainty around that stuff, right? Like I can talk about that for myself for sure. And I've written about it, but like, I think it's a super interesting thing to me. And it is true that like, I mean, one thing that you are kind of pointing to there, which is a fact of, which has been sort of, researched, is that people who grew up very religious are more inclined to have discomfort with uncertainty. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like people who grew up in a strong culture of faith, a strong church or whatever belief system, that sort of propensity to need to believe things, to need to have an answer, that discomfort with uncertainty carries over into lots of other areas of their life. So like, the evangelical Christians, for example, like, everything's explained to them. And so like in all other domains, they also are uncomfortable with uncertainty.
That the word, so in Spanish, there's obviously the Moors ruled Spain for 700 years. So there's a lot of words that made it into the Spanish language that are not of Romance origin. One is the word for hope is ojalá, which literally means that Allah wills it. Like I don't have control over it, so hope is embedded in the idea that, well, God already has decided, so I can't control it.
There's some sort of providence or whatever, or even predetermination.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's like you're turning over. I don't have the right to hope because God's going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So you're almost like saying like you're dispossessing yourself of the desire for that thing to occur.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost like saying like it's almost saying like that
it's out of my hands.
Yeah, that I would hope it happens is ridiculous and a waste of time. It's futile. Right. Because God already will decide, So it's
like I'm not going to sweat something I can't control.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, right? Like the idea.
And I guess that's kind of how I feel. Like I'm not going to worry too much about what I can't know. Like, and then as a new piece of information arrives, I'll be like, oh, that pushes me slightly more towards this answer or that answer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or it makes me even more uncertain, right? Like, in other words, like each new piece of information, I will sort of log it and I'll go, okay, well that goes into the pile of that question. And now it's like tilted the balance a little bit this way or that way. It's funny because like in so many of my conversations back and forth with my brother during the COVID thing, because that's where my brother and I really had our kind of falling out, was just he was so rabidly anti-COVID vaccine, right?
Anti-mask,
and vax in general, and masks, and like his his communications to me would oscillate between COVID is a hoax, COVID is a bioweapon. Well, it's like, is it a hoax or is it a bioweapon, right? Like it was like he was latching on to anything except like what the mainstream was saying about it. It was like any other thing would satisfy him. And I would just try to point out, like, these two things are incompatible. Like
polar opposites, right?
Like pick one. You know what I mean? Like, and I would just, in that conversation, I'd sort of try to point out to him, like, you obviously don't know. Like, we can just both not know. You know what I mean? Like, you're not an epidemiologist or a scientist, and you're not doing field research on what COVID is, and neither am I. Like, you're just listening to some podcasts that seem to say stuff that you like, right? Like I'm listening to different stories that say stuff that makes sense to me. Like, we're both just bros, like, in this media world, like, making shit up, right? Like, can't you just acknowledge that, like, I don't know I don't know the answer, my brother. And like, can't you just acknowledge that all you're doing is listening to some different podcasts? Yeah. And you have different ideas, but they're not answers, they're just ideas, right? Yeah. Like, and it never registered with him that, like, maybe we just can't know, like, because we're not doing the fucking science ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It makes me think, for some reason, I wanted to go back to the QAnon phenomenon that was happening. I think the QAnon, didn't it start before the pandemic during the Trump administration? Wasn't it like 2016 to 2020? There was like a heavy prior to like the QAnon people who were going, like, Save the Children.
Yeah.
Maybe it blew up in the pandemic.
I think it was during Trump's first term
that it started. He even started referring to them. He'd say, I don't really know what it is, but they like me. So whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so I remember
John Gantz calls that whole phenomenon of the Trump, coalition, the coalition of the weird. It's just like they welcomed any weird idea. You know what I mean? Like, and it felt good to those people to be welcomed into the fold, versus mocked or chastised or scolded.
So I would sometimes, just for fun, because it was entertaining to me,
it's like, you believe the Earth is flat? Yeah.
Anyway, I would dive into the QAnon thing, and my wife got really annoyed because I would comedically spout what I would just kind of start saying QAnon shit. Like, I'd be like, I can't believe I went to Q.com and there were tons of links and I was doing my own research. It was great. Anyway, but there was this really, really funny kind of Mobius strip, like a snake eating its tail, where the QAnon people were trying to figure out who Q was.
Right.
And there was that movie on Netflix where it was some dude who started
HBO Max,
8chan or 4chan. That guy was his son was doing in the Philippines. But then they were like, no, General Flynn in Army intelligence studied, seeding propaganda in foreign countries as a weapon. Like, so mind weapon, and they're like, it's General Flynn and he's writing the posts. And you can tell because this is how he writes, and this sentence is like, he writes it in this essay, like, they're like all, and it was funny to watch.
That's what I mean by, like, those kind of clues, right? Like, it's totally a game. It's totally
but it was funny to watch that Flynn was going around the country giving speeches.
Yeah.
And his own sort of devotee followers had a conspiracy that he was Q.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was just this.
Well, and then he was flirting with it a little bit too, because he would say Q stuff in his speeches, and he had like the QAnon people had a slogan, an acronym. It was like W. And it was like a whole string of letters starting with a W. I can't remember what it was. It was like,
they just say the storm is coming.
The storm is coming. That was another one. It was like I don't remember what it was. It was a what you blah, 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 blah. And it was like this whole string of letters. And Michael Flynn would put that on his, like on his Twitter bio or whatever.
Oh,
right.
Weird.
So he was definitely.
Yeah. He was taking advantage of it.
Flirting or like, flirting with, courting the Q people quite a bit. That whole documentary, I think it was on HBO, not at Max, not Netflix, but I remember, I guess, I was fascinated because I'm fascinated with all this disinformation, conspiracy theories, all that for obvious reasons. Fascinated, depressed, addicted to that whole topic. But when I watched that, I wasn't interested in who Q was at all. Like, I have no interest in that. Like, that's where the it was like episode 3 and beyond that kind of were really focused on. It was like a 5-part documentary, right? The whole, most of it, the bulk of it was focused on like trying to figure out who Q is. Mm-hmm. And I think it sort of pretty much settled on those guys in the Philippines, those father and son.
And they were like 8chan or something.
The son in particular, yeah. But the thing that fascinated me about it was the first episode, they kind of go through these people, these regular people that are really into Q, right? And they're just like spouting these crazy ideas about like JFK's not dead and JFK Jr.'s not dead, and they're going to be in Austin on this day, and if this guy, this random weirdo, is actually JFK, you know, who didn't die, that kind of shit, right?
Was it like the guy with the like beard that doesn't look anything like him? And he keeps popping up at Trump rallies.
Absolute fucking bonkers lunacy, right? Like you're listening to this guy, this married couple or whatever, just spouting this stuff, and it's just like, but the thing that fascinates me, the thing that I couldn't let go of was that like those married couples and that guy and like all those people that have embraced this like totally bonkers, like nonsense. They also just work regular jobs, like, and collect regular salaries. And I remember I've talked to various friends about this. I had a friend that put it really well, but I was just like, because the thing that I find that I land on is just like, how can you be that living so deeply in a totally alternate, like bonkers reality on the one hand, and still just like continue to go to work and shopping and make your food and like, there's a part of me that's just like, how do those things coexist in the same person? Like, you think if you've embraced that much of a weird alternate world, like you would cease to function in the real world in a way. You know what I mean? I mean, like you would be living in a basement and you would be surviving on ramen noodles and fucking, who knows, and cigarettes, right? But these people, they like go, and I guess what I kind of landed on was just like, we live in a weird world where you don't have to know the truth about like you can think the world's flat, the earth is flat. And in most areas of life, it doesn't really matter. Like you don't have to know whether the earth is round or flat. Like you can just continue to go to work and unless you're doing astronomy, you know what I mean? Like if you're just working as a marketing middle manager at some, tech company, you could believe the earth is flat. It doesn't really, like, there's no impact that has on your job. That's super fascinating to me. That you can believe something that dumb and still just operate like a normal human in the world and eat and sleep and fuck and all that.
I'm going to read one of my Q things. So, do you know how people like fish? Like they'll text you and they'll say, "Are we meeting for lunch today?" And then you'll be like, "Who is this?" And who dis? New phone? Who dis? Yeah. And then they always try to sort of get you into a chat. Right. Like I don't actually know.
Right. Like text spam where they like it's like wrong number texts.
Yeah, exactly.
They're trying to hook you.
Or if you're lonely,
they want you to at least reply like, "Oh, I think you texted this to the wrong person." That's what they're hoping for.
Yeah.
At least that, and then they want to get started with something beyond that. Oh, yeah, well, you sound interesting. They're going to be
like, if you are bored, you should go to my OnlyFans.com. /
or whatever,
Larissa,
right.
whatever. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I always write back. Like, let's say Melissa wrote to me. She's like, "I'm Melissa." They say, "Oh, sorry, I thought this was Melissa's number." Mm-hmm. And then that it's a spam thing when they keep going. And they're like, "Well, what about you? If Melissa's not going to meet me for lunch, what about you?" And you're right. You know what I mean? So I always write back, "Wait, I sometimes write, wait, are you Q?" And then they say, "Who's Q?" And I say, General Flynn warns us, stay alert, keep your head down, offline, keep eyes peeled for Q drops. We got this for hashtag Eye of the Storm. And then they never fucking ever write enough.
Funny. There's a whole like TikTok genre that I love, which is like scamming the scammers, like messing with scammers. There's some really funny people that do that. There's one guy who disguises his voice like he sounds like an old person, like a senior citizen who just like, they're trying to guide him through using the computer, like he's screen sharing with them, and they're trying to get him to like give their bank account or whatever. But in the meantime, he's hacking them and figuring out where they are. But he's got like a voice changer that changes his voice till he sounds like an old lady talking to them. And they're getting super frustrated because he doesn't. And I saw another woman the other day. The scammer was like, "Tell me your address," and she's like, "I'm address." He's like, "No, tell me your address." I'm address. He's like, "Why do you want me to tell you that? I'm address." And he's like, "No, you stupid. Tell me your address." "I told you I'm address. I don't know why you need me to tell you that though." And he's just getting so frustrated.
Do you think that they're like two actors are making it up just to get views?
Maybe. It's totally possible. Who knows what the fuck's real anymore in this world?
Uncle Noel, the comedian, Noel Rhodes, he made an entire slideshow kind of comedy skit out of this one Hollywood dude that called and left. Remember, we used to have answering machines? Mm-hmm. And sometimes someone would think that they're talking to their friend and they'd leave a very long, complicated one.
Yeah.
So he left this one, and he was a personal trainer who was trying to sell his services to this person who he thought was like an executive or something. And it wasn't it was a wrong number, but he left this long thing. It is so fucking funny. No, I can't really. You'd have to listen to the way he responds.
No, there's nobody that can. You can't really do justice to an Noel Rhodes sketch by trying to explain it or describe it, because it's his comedy is so uniquely strange. And yeah,
it's true. Darren once invited him to come give a comedy. A skit. What's the term? It's basically like a comedy act. Like a stand-up act to come to celebrate the Yoga Oasis yoga studio 10-year anniversary. He walks in carrying a mattress, like a mattress, and throws it down on the floor. And he's like, "Why do you guys have those skinny mats? Like, it hurts my wrist. Like, I want soft. Like, I want to be." And then he goes. Then he pretended to say like he was a yoga teacher, like a workshop teacher, and he's like. "You guys, everyone's always trying to teach you how to be like meditative, and I say, I'm going to teach you how to win at yoga. No one else in the industry is teaching you how to actually win. That's the most important thing." And then he just goes off on this whole night of winning at yoga. He had a song.
Yeah, I love it.
It's really funny.
Yeah, anyway. It's interesting because his comedy's definitely built for the YouTube era. I mean, like the TikTok era, and it's just like. I guess he does stuff still once in a while, but like, it seems like the current era is made for what he does, and he should have a channel with thousands of videos on it, because it seems like he's the kind of guy that would.
It almost seems like if he mined all of those, he was like ahead of his time. So there was no TikTok, and he was on YouTube and could never find an audience. And I mean, I've definitely seen. Even Saturday Night Live has done those skits where he's faking the pharma ads. They've like definitely been inspired. Yeah. I think they've been inspired by him, unless there's other comedians that are doing that too. But I don't know.
Yeah, but no, I mean his stuff is so funny, and it would like, I don't know, his sort of unique lens on the world is so good. It would be, I think it's the current tech media era is built for his kind of thing, but he was ahead of his time.
Let's put in the show notes a link to whatever channel we can find that's the best one for him. I think he has a Rhodes and Rhodes as a YouTube channel. But the most recent one he did was this very elaborate song called "You Had One Job." Have you heard that?
Yeah, I saw that. We posted that on the channel once before already.
The one job. I love it. And I kept saying it's got to be Merrick Garland. He's talking to Merrick Garland. There's one person, also an audience for one person.
Right.
Hey, so let's wrap it up. I did want to say, let's make a commitment to make maybe the next episode about that. When did you have the conversion from practicing religious person to
how did that
atheist? Or
how did that whole arc play out for you? Yeah. For sure. I'd be very interested in.
And I'm going to give a sneak peek, which for me was Divine Love and Wisdom. I think it was with Pendleton. And I remember coming away from that class or reading the book saying, this isn't a Christian religion. This is like non-dualist. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, he just says, I was like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, nothing exists in the universe except for the Lord's energy flows into it. And I was like, it just sounds like electrons or something. It doesn't. It doesn't sound Christian at all. Like, if you read that book.
It sounds like Swedenborg took some LSD and had an experience.
He did have an herb garden
of oneness. Yeah.
He had an herb garden, and there's a lot of evidence.
Well, and those guys were doing some stuff for sure back then.
Yeah. Yeah. I just found out that the term pipe dream actually originated from in the US in the 1890s. There were a lot of Chinatowns, especially in Chicago, San Francisco, LA, where you could just go to like the opium alley and smoke opium. And the visions that you would have, that people would say, oh, that's a pipe dream. Because you only could see it when you were on opium, and then it became...
Right. That makes sense, yeah.
And since it was something that would wear off, they would say, your idea is something that's unrealistic, so it must be a pipe dream, because in the morning you're like, didn't make sense now. Anyway.
Well, that's a good thing to end on. We taught the audience something.
About the pipe dream, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's say goodbye. Satellite haiku. Satellites?
A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.